Hollywood loves to feed us this image: a steel-clad knight, the creak of his armor, a heavy sword in his hand, his life an endless cycle of battlefield training. You picture him standing on a dusty training ground, sweat dripping down his helmet, every sword strike honed to perfection. His world is the mud of the training ground, the weight of his weapons, the clang of steel, and a constant readiness for war. We see grim, silent warriors for whom the only game is mortal combat, and any leisure time is merely a battle simulation, a way to sharpen their combat skills. Romanticized history whispers to us of a code of honor, of tournaments as preparation for real battles, of unending martial prowess. It's a convenient, beautiful, but damnably superficial image that has firmly entrenched itself in our minds, making us believe that the medieval knight was a war machine and nothing else mattered to him, much less some game. But what if I told you that this image is merely a skillful yet deceptive facade, concealing a far more complex and, at times, shocking truth? When we talk about knights, we instantly picture a heavy blade, a steel helmet, a fearsome battle cry. And there's some truth to that. Their world truly was one of conflict, where military training was vitally important. But what if these stern warriors, these noble lords and kings, spent colossal sums, vast amounts of time, and even their own lives on a sport we would today call elite tennis? Yes, you heard that right. While we idealize them as perpetually sword-clashing fighters, the reality was far more multifaceted and, dare I say, even absurd. Noble individuals weren't merely indulging in physical recreation, they invested in a true sport of kings. Jeu de paume. This game required expensive indoor courts, specialized equipment, and immense time commitments, making it an exclusive privilege of the elite. This wasn't a minor pastime, not just a warm-up before battle, but a central, prestigious part of their status, their identity, their very way of life. So, why then, if their lives were so harsh and centered on war, did these hardened warriors spend entire fortunes on games that could cost them not only money, but their very lives? Why was elite sports so important that monarchs risked everything, from their reputation to their very existence? Brace yourselves, because what you're about to learn won't just redefine your idea of noble medieval leisure. It will show you a world where a ball, a racket, and a court were sometimes more dangerous than a sword and shield, and a passion for the game led to the most unexpected and deadly consequences, completely shattering the Hollywood myth of the knight without a racket. So, if Hollywood has painted us a picture of a knight with a sword, a widespread misconception follows that for these warriors, sport was just light entertainment, holding no serious importance, simply a way to blow off some steam or get a bit of exercise. We tend to think their world was too harsh for mere games, unless it was a jousting tournament mimicking actual combat. But what if this light entertainment was actually an entire world where fortunes were invested and which defined status just as much as military victories? What if it wasn't just a game, but an intricate system for displaying wealth, power, and refinement, one that completely debunks the myth of the skeptical knight who scorned leisure? Imagine yourself in a completely different setting. You're standing in a luxurious indoor court where the air is filled with the subtle scent of leather, expensive wood, and sweat. Not the rough outdoor kind of sweat, but the sweat of thrill and prestige. Around you are not the dirty walls of barracks, but meticulously polished wooden panels, high vaulted ceilings, through which light softly filters in. The sound of the ball hitting the wall echoes through the galleries, where noble ladies in silks and lords in velvet sit, closely following every move. This is not just a game, it's a ritual. Every gesture, every stroke of the player who deftly returns the ball with a glove or a racket is a display not only of physical strength, but also of sophistication and grace. There's no place for commoners here, no room for crudeness. This is not a muddy field for folk games where you can get covered in mud. This is a temple of elite leisure where even suits of armor yielded to light, yet expensive clothing, and the demonstration of status and refinement was no less important than martial prowess. What you've just pictured is not just a beautiful scene out of some idealized novel. It was a tangible reality for the medieval elite. But why did this particular game, Jeu de Paume, hold such a central place in their lives, challenging the notion of it being a frivolous activity? The answer lies in its exclusivity and immense cost. Of course, one might assume that knights sometimes did play for recreation, just like anyone else. Taking a break from the rigors of war, relieving stress, that makes perfect sense. But this game was far more than just recreation. It required the construction of expensive indoor courts, which in itself represented a massive financial investment. This wasn't just a simple backyard court, it was a complex architectural structure, accessible only to those who could afford such an extravagance. The training, the equipment, all of it was incredibly expensive and completely out of reach for commoners. What's more, laws literally restricted the game of Jeu de Paume to nobility and royalty, solidifying its status as an exclusive privilege for the chosen few. King Charles V aptly called it one of the most noble, dignified, and healthful exercises that princes, peers, and other distinguished persons can engage in. This was a sport that loudly proclaimed your social standing, your wealth, and your power. Real tennis was more than just a game. It was a powerful social marker signifying membership in the upper echelons of society, where the display of wealth and sophistication was no less important than military prowess. It was a means not just for entertainment, but also to make a statement and solidify one's status within the hierarchy. So, we see that tennis wasn't just a game, but a whole ritual for the elite, a symbol of their power and status consuming vast resources. But what if this noble pastime was far more dangerous than any battlefield? What if it literally killed kings, transforming from a symbol of status into an instrument of fate, or even the very reason for their tragic demise? Prepare yourselves, because the following stories will make you rethink the risks of medieval leisure. We tend to idealize monarchs, picturing them living in luxury and security, surrounded by legions of servants and guards. A common misconception paints a picture where royalty was almost invulnerable, especially on the tennis court, where their leisure seemed absolutely safe and controlled. Who could possibly threaten a king during a game other than perhaps a clumsy shot? This naive belief in the inviolability of royal status is deeply ingrained in our consciousness. But what if this notion of invulnerability is just another fatal error, and the elite's beloved game was not merely dangerous, but a lethally treacherous pastime? Let me take you back to these fateful moments. Picture this: the scorching summer of 1316. You are King Louis the X, having just finished an exhausting, intense match on your court. Your heart is pounding in your throat, sweat stings your eyes, mixing with sand and dust, and the air feels superheated. Every movement causes pain, but the thrill of the game won't let you go. You greedily reach for a pitcher, downing icy wine in one gulp to quench the burning fire within, and suddenly, a sharp, piercing pain rips through your chest. The world begins to spin, your vision blurs, and you collapse to the floor, gasping for air, realizing this match was your last. Now, picture a different scene. A damp, cold evening in 1437. You are James I, King of Scotland, and assassins are hunting you down. Desperation drives you into a sewer, an exit you yourself ordered, sealed off to prevent losing precious tennis balls. The smell of dampness, of sewage, and fear clogs your lungs. You hear approaching footsteps, the clatter of weapons. In this pitch-black darkness, in this trap you created to protect your tennis balls, you realize that your passion for the game has led you not to victory, but to your own demise. These aren't just tragic scenes pulled from the chronicles. This is the palpable reality of the Middle Ages, where even what seemed like the safest pastimes could lead to a deadly end. But why was it tennis, this noble sport, that resulted in such horrific, sometimes even absurd deaths among the elite? One might, of course, assume that royalty, possessing unlimited resources and power, could ensure maximum safety on the court, transforming the game into a completely controlled spectacle. But historical records mercilessly dispel this illusion. King Louis XIII of France, known for his passion for jeu de paume, indeed died in 1316 after an excessively intense game, compounded by his consumption of a vast quantity of chilled wine, likely leading to hypothermia or a heart attack. His death serves as direct evidence that even uncontrolled and excessive physical activity could prove fatal for a monarch, let alone enemies. Or take James Lord of Scotland, whose story is truly unbelievable. He was assassinated in 1437 while trying to hide from his killers in a sewer pipe which he himself had ordered sealed up to prevent tennis balls from rolling away. This ironic and brutal end to his life, directly linked to his obsession with the game, shows just how powerful this passion was, to the point of neglecting his own safety. And finally, Charles VIII, another French king, who died in 1498 after hitting his head on a low doorframe on his way to a tennis match. Not on the battlefield, not by an enemy's hand, but from a mundane accident caused by his eagerness for the game. Even in the seemingly safest and most noble pastimes, such as tennis, medieval monarchs faced mortal danger. Sometimes it was due to their own carelessness, other times it was a fateful turn of events directly tied to their passion for the game. These stories shatter the myth of their invulnerability and reveal that human error and pure chance were no less perilous than any sword-wielding foe. These stories are not just tragic anecdotes from dusty chronicles. They show that tennis was not just a game, but a part of life where the stakes were incredibly high and the consequences irreversible. But what if this game was also the backdrop for the most cold-blooded and brutal acts of power? What if, on the court, it wasn't just points being played, but people's destinies, and a swing of the racket could be as symbolic as a sword stroke, but with a far darker undertone? Get ready, because the next chapter will reveal how the royal game became a stage for an inhumane display of power. So, we have already dispelled the notion that sports for knights were merely a casual pastime, and have confirmed that it could be deadly even for kings. However, a common misconception stubbornly insists that knights played tennis solely for physical training and fair competition. We imagine noble rivals, respecting the rules, striving for athletic excellence. A kind of medieval Olympic arena where valor is displayed not only on the battlefield, but also on the court. But what if this picture is just another smokescreen, concealing a far more disturbing and ruthless reality, where the game served merely as a backdrop for the most brutal acts of power, and fair competition was the last thing the elite had in mind? Let me take you to Hampton Court on a sweltering May day in 1536. You stand on the court, feeling the polished wood beneath your feet, hearing the crisp squeak of rackets and the dull, rhythmic thud of the ball against the wall. It's the sound of a measured, almost meditative game. Cold sweat trickles down Henry VIII's forehead, but not from the exertion of the game, but from something else, from the weight of absolute power and cold calculation. His face is impassive, his movements precise, but in every stroke you sense not just passion, but something far more sinister. And as he plays beyond the palace walls at this very moment, the execution of his wife, Anne Boleyn, is being prepared. Every few minutes, a faint, almost imperceptible bell tolls, marking the final moments of her life. And as she draws her last breaths, the king continues to play, his gaze vacant, focused solely on the ball. This is not just a game. It is a demonstration of absolute chilling power, ruthless and inhumane. You've just experienced the chilling atmosphere where sport wasn't merely entertainment, but a tool of power. But why did this seemingly noble game so often become an arena for the basest aspects of human nature to emerge, and betray any semblance of the fair competition we're so often told about? Certainly, one could argue that sports were meant for physical training, as knights were, after all, warriors, and undoubtedly, elements of physical activity were certainly present. The reality, however, is far more complex. The story of Henry VIII playing tennis at Hampton Court while his wife Anne Boleyn was executed in 1536 is not merely a shocking anecdote. It is the clearest evidence that, for the elite, jeu de paume was not only a physical exercise, but also a powerful stage for the demonstration of power, status, and, at times, outright inhumanity. It was a backdrop against which political dramas and personal tragedies unfolded, where the game continued, even as a person's fate was being sealed nearby. What's more, fair competition often gave way to entirely different motives. Gambling was an incredibly popular part of jeu de paume. The nobility placed enormous bets, turning every match into a financial showdown where honor yielded to profit. Tournaments, whether melee, massed knightly battles, or jousting, were also held not just for training, but to display wealth, forge social connections, and of course for betting. It was a complex web where sport was just one element in the display of status, influence, and financial power, and honesty could easily be sacrificed for personal gain or political objectives. For the medieval elite, sport was more than just entertainment. It was a stage for demonstrating power, wealth, and even a chilling disregard for human life, turning the noble game into a backdrop for political intrigue and cruelty. It served not only for physical training, but also as a mirror, reflecting the true nature of those who held the fates of entire kingdoms in their hands. We've seen how tennis was interwoven into the very fabric of life and death for medieval nobility, leading to the deaths of kings and serving as the backdrop for their cruelest decisions. But what does this mean for our understanding of knighthood itself? Is all this romance, all these tales of honor and valor, just a smokescreen concealing a far more complex and at times repulsive reality where true motives were far from ideal? Brace yourselves, because in the final chapter, we will piece all these fragments together and forever shatter the image of the knight that has been so persistently imposed upon us. We began this journey by challenging the very image of the medieval knight, the one Hollywood and romantic literature have immortalized as a fearless warrior whose life was entirely devoted to the sword, shield, and endless military training. And, of course, there's a grain of truth to that. The world of knighthood was indeed a world of conflict, where martial prowess was valued above all else, and physical fitness was a matter of survival. This image is powerful. It draws us in with its brutal simplicity and seeming straightforwardness. But this idealized picture is only half the truth, concealing a far more complex and at times shocking reality. Our investigation revealed that alongside the clashing of swords, there was a completely different world. The world of jeu de paume, real tennis. This was more than just a game. It was an intricate social ritual, a privilege reserved exclusively for the elite. Indoor courts cost fortunes, training was only available to a select few, and laws explicitly forbade commoners from even touching this sport of kings. Tennis was no mere sideline amusement, but instead a powerful marker of power and wealth, a demonstration of refinement and status, sometimes far more significant than victory in a tournament or even on the battlefield. It was part of their identity, their way of life, disproving the myth of the knight for whom sport was merely a light diversion. Yet this noble game, contrary to all expectations, proved to be fatally dangerous. We've seen King Louis VI dies of hypothermia after a match, King James I of Scotland meet his gruesome end in a sewer he himself had bricked up for tennis balls, and Charles VIII perish from a ridiculous blow on his way to the court. Tennis didn't just take money, it took the lives of kings. And finally, we are faced with a chilling display of power. Henry VIII coolly playing tennis while his wife Anne Boleyn was led to the scaffold. This was no fair competition. It was a backdrop for political intrigue, high-stakes gambling, and inhumane domination. The knights weren't merely training. They lived, risked, schemed, and died because of their passions, sometimes the most unexpected ones. This inconvenient truth is crucial not just for rewriting history textbooks. It matters to every single one of us. How many more beautiful stories do we take at face value? How many Hollywood illusions blind us, preventing us from seeing the true complexity and contradictions of the past? By debunking the myths about knights, we learn to think critically, to seek the depth beneath the glittering facade, and to understand that history is always multifaceted, while human nature remains constant in its complexity, regardless of era or status. We must stop viewing the past as merely black and white and begin to embrace it in all its gray, sometimes shocking reality. So, the next time you imagine a medieval knight, clad in steel, sword at the ready, pause. Add something unexpected to that image. Picture him not just on the battlefield, but also on a lavish court, a sweaty palm gripping a racket, eyes full of excitement, not just martial fury. Smell the expensive wood and leather, hear the thwack of the ball. And remember, this noble warrior could be just as dangerous to himself and others on the tennis court as he was on the battlefield. Because a knight without armor isn't just a man ready for war, he's also a man obsessed with a game, willing to do anything for it, even at the cost of his own life. The myth of the warrior knight is shattered. Before you stands a complex, contradictory living person whose story is far more fascinating than any Hollywood fairy tale.